So while Democrats are confident they can pass the president's spending bill in the House, its future in the Senate is more uncertain, mainly because of moderate Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. He continues to express concerns about the cost of the bill and inflation. Joining me right now to talk more about this is Christopher Regan. He is the former vice chair of the Democratic Party in West Virginia, and he knows Senator Joe Manchin well when Manchin served as the governor in that state. Good to see you again, Chris.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of Senator Manchin potentially standing in the way of the passing of the president's Build Back Better plan when for a moment it sounded optimistic, only to dial it back and say he continues to be concerned about costs?
Well, I continue to think that he will eventually get to yes on the bill. But as long as the bill has gone on, more and more deals are being made. I mean, you're talking about $1.5 to $2 trillion in the package that's on the move. Several weeks ago, we talked about how there was money for waste coal, which is a business that Joe Manchin is actually in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and he got that. And there was recently a Toyota investment, and he was present in West Virginia at the site of a Toyota plant, talking about how he was going to change the credits for electric vehicles, union-made electric vehicles. And so a deal seems to be made there where he's going to turn against that. And then, of course, there's work he's doing on the climate provisions, as was reported. And all those things, in order for them to come into fruition, the bill eventually has to pass. Mm-hmm. So I still think that he's a yes on the bill, but the inflation headlines give him more reason to talk about delay. And during the delay, more deals can be made.
So a couple steps forward, only for yet another step back. Earlier this year, you wrote a piece for The Atlantic, headlined "What the Media Are Missing About Joe Manchin." And in it, you wrote, "Manchin has skillfully managed his image to stay viable in a state that went from a Democratic to a Republican majority. He has done that by having a keen sense of what issues and bills are popular at any given moment and of how he can be seen as being on the right side of those issues for the electorate, no matter which party is in favor of them." So then how do you see his strategizing on this? Because this social spending bill is hugely popular across the country, yet like you just laid out, he'll take a couple steps forward, seems to chip away or at least get some of what he wants, only to then step back and say his latest big issue is inflation. And is this a good time for a bill of this magnitude?
Yeah, I see it in exactly two steps in the ingredients that you're talking about. First, he's going to position himself as having trimmed the bill down, as having moderated its contents, brought the total figure down, and laying down a lot of markers that the progressives are frustrated with him because that burnishes his moderate credentials. He's going to talk about the deficit, work requirements, all things we associate with the more conservative approach that Republicans have, which he thinks are going to be popular in West Virginia. This has become a very conservative state. But at the end of the day, the president's agenda, probably has to go forward, and he's going to want to be a part of that because there is so much in this bill that is helpful to West Virginia. The free preschool provisions, the child care provisions, family leave provisions, all of those things disproportionately help poor and poor children, and West Virginia has more per capita of those than almost anyone.
Yeah.
When they're projecting that this bill could cut childhood poverty in half by 50%, that's one of the best policy outcomes West Virginia could possibly get. So I think eventually he gets to yes.
Yeah, let's zero in on that. The White House and policy experts say this bill could have a pretty sizable impact on West Virginia, let alone other places too. But for West Virginia, it extends the child tax credit, lifting about 22,000 West Virginia children above the poverty line. It would make child care free for any West Virginia household making under $37,000 a year. And the paid family and medical leave would benefit all of West Virginia's 690,000 workers. So how does Manchin convince residents in this state that, this plan as laid out like that doesn't help them?
Right. I don't think he'll try. I think he simply intends to use. Now remember, the bill's not even in the Senate yet. He's pointed that out a few times. That nothing's come over from the House yet until the vote happens this week. So all of this time while the bill is simply pending allows him to position himself in a moderate way, position himself even closer to Republican voters that West Virginia has many more of than Democratic voters. But at the end of the day, he'll be able to say, now this bill is something that I support, and shift to talking about all those benefits that it has for West Virginia. I mean, in particular, including and also consummating the deals made along the way. The things he's able to do on the climate provisions to help his longtime backers, to help his own coal business. Those bills, that all has to be. The bill has to pass for those deals to go into effect, and I think he wants that to happen.
My colleague Manu Raju reported this week that even after some House progressives had attacked Manchin for his opposition to the bill, other progressives have been reaching out to Manchin behind the scenes to de-escalate the tension. So what advice would you give Democrats, anyone who, including the president, who are trying to make a deal with Manchin? Is there a psychology on how to convince him to get on board by some other way of making it seem as though it's his idea, as opposed to trying to twist his arm?
Absolutely. I think the de-escalators absolutely have it correct there. I was thinking about this this week, and thinking about President Biden's approach, because it had occurred to me that President Biden has been in the Senate or the vice president or the president for longer than I've been alive, way back into the 1970s. And he knows how to get a bill to the Senate. I think he knows what he's doing, and he has pulled Manchin closer to him rather than attacked him. But on the other hand, when a really, really hard left voice attacks Manchin, he's pocketing that too. I mean, if he runs in 2024, his opponent will try to portray him as a tool of the radical left. And he's going to be like, well, roll tape on attacks on me from the very progressive left that occurred during the build-up to the passage of this bill. So he'll be able to point to that and say, I'm not a tool of the radical left. Remember me? I'm the guy who moderated things. I'm the guy who talked about the deficit. I'm the guy who thought people need to be working for their benefits. And that's probably what's going to play well in West Virginia in 2024, if what played well in 2020 is any guide.
I now hear your phone ringing. You've officially become the Senator Manchin whisperer. People will be calling you to get more tips on how to manage, how to negotiate, how to work with.
I've been living with the news on this man for a long time. He was elected governor 16 years ago in West Virginia, and he's been in the news ever since. So you pay attention to what he does, and you can figure out what he might do next.
All right, Chris Regan, good to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.